Like we can't put anyone on a pedestal.
Yeah.
I do want to I do want to unpack the rock bottom for a little bit here because
Yeah.
I know a little bit about your story losing Travis in Iraq and then a few years later losing your mother to cancer, and that kind of led towards this rock bottom season, which came with panic attacks, which were new for you. Before we get to the panic attacks, when you were kind of headed towards rock bottom, did you have any indicators at all that might happen?
So in the course of 5 years, my brother was killed on April 29th, 2007. And then September 21st, 2010, his best friend and college roommate was killed in Afghanistan, who I was very close with as well, and was very much a support person for our family after
Mm.
we lost Travis. So Brendan was killed in Afghanistan in September of 2010. And then April of 2012, my mom died of cancer. And on the same day, my 94-year-old grandmother just didn't wake up. So my
Mhm.
mom and my grandmother, her mom, died on the same day.
Wow.
And it was just like all of a sudden, these 5 years of loss all kind of hit me. And, I processed through that. And again, like you're very busy. Like when you're dealing with grief in the beginning, there's a lot of people around, there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of different events happening, especially with a military loss. A lot of ceremonies, a lot of memorials. It was December of that following year. So my mom and my grandmother died in April, December of that same year. It was Christmas night.
Hmm.
And I went to bed and woke up, just thought I was dying. Literally thought I was dying. Like the panic attack I was having, I thought I was having a heart attack. And my husband said, I said, I think I'm dying. I need to go to the ER. And he was like, you're having an anxiety attack. Just calm down. And, he kind of downplayed it, which actually made it better,
Huh.
in some sense, because I think if he would have played into my hysteria,
Blown
it
it
would have
up.
been way worse.
Yeah.
But he was like, just chill out, go to bed. But what happened from there was debilitating anxiety. Like that panic attack went away. But I woke up every day for about 6 months with debilitating anxiety,
Hmm.
to the point where I became, and I don't know what the terms are for it, but there's, they've got all these terms, but like I didn't want to leave the house. My office, our headquarters at the Travis Manion Foundation, was like 2 miles down the road. Even driving there was debilitating for me. And I'm a super independent person. And so it scared me so much that this is who I was now.
Hmm.
Um, I wouldn't drive at dark, all these different phobias that you hear people having that you're kind of like, how, like I had them
They
all.
came out of
And
nowhere.
it was all based off this idea that I didn't want to go anywhere because I didn't want what happened that night on Christmas, that was untriggered by anything beknownst to me, to happen when I was, in a public place. And so I just was like, I shut down. And there was one day, it was probably about 6 months, and nobody really knew I was dealing with it. I mean, I was popping like Xanax in the car just to get through a day of work,
Hmm.
just to go into the office for a day. I'd
Crazy.
have to take a Xanax just to get through the day. And one morning I woke up, and every morning when I woke up, it was like I would open my eyes and just pray not to feel that anxiety. And I was in the shower one morning and I had this thought where it was just like, if this is what life looks like, I don't want it.
Hmm.
Like I'm done. And it scared me so much to have that
That thought.
idea in my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, that thought. And it scared me so much that that was where I turned, and I turned to my dad and I was like, I need help.
Hmm.
And, you know, talking about mental health was not something that was like generally practiced in my home. And I don't blame my dad. I think it was a product of like the times too, you know, growing up in the 80s, you know, it just wasn't like a thing back then.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, you know, it was taboo. I also grew up in a military household. My dad was a, you know, colonel in the Marine Corps. Like he's not, you know, he's not talking about mental health with you. And in fact, when I would, anytime when I was growing up, if I would talk to my dad about my feelings, right? Like, oh, I'm sad or I'm upset, anything like that, my dad would turn to a physical component that could help me get through it.
Yeah.
And I joke around now, like when I go out and deliver speeches, it would be like, I failed a test. And my dad would be like, go for a run, think about it. You know, and I'd be like, I think my arm's broken. We'll go for a run. And when you come back, if it's still hurting, we'll get it checked out.
Yeah.
So he literally thought that every thing that you were dealing with could be healed by going for a run.
Physical.
And yeah, physically. And you know, again, looking back now where I am today, I understand that my dad definitely knew that there was a very big connection between physical and mental health. So that's the lesson he was trying to teach me. But not everything you're dealing with mentally can be healed by going for a run.
Yeah.
And so for me to have to say to him, like, I need help, was a big step. And so I started going to therapy, and that was, you know, I thought going to therapy was going to be a way for, I just needed her to tell me, like, how do I not feel like this anymore? I need your help. And in fact, for a while, the only time I felt okay was sitting in that therapist's office, because I was able to release everything that I was feeling. But when I would leave, it would go back. And then it would, you know, the number started to change where it was like, well, half the day I could get through. And it was, you know, a few months in where she finally said, you know, we've been talking for a while, and you know, I'm definitely ready to give you a diagnosis. And I remember I was like, wait, I didn't know you were like examining me. I thought I was just like sharing my shit with you,
Just
right?
talking.
And she's like, well, you have a really severe case of PTSD.
Hmm.
And I was so pissed off when she told me that. I left the office. I called Amy, who is my brother's best friend Brendan's widow. And I called her and I'm like, you'll never believe this. And she knew what I was going through. I'm like, my therapist just diagnosed me with PTSD. Like, what an idiot. And she was like, Ryan, I was diagnosed with PTSD like a year after Brendan died. Like, just, you know, catch up,
Crazy.
you know. And
Yeah.
she minimized it in a way where I was like, okay, I didn't like having a diagnosis, you know. It felt uncomfortable to me. But I had to learn to get rid of the stigma on mental health that I had placed on it, because I definitely had a stigma about mental health, be it my upbringing, but like it felt like I was not mentally tough if I was giving in to like mental health diagnoses.
Yeah.
So that was tough for me.
Especially because you had tried, it sounds like you had tried a little bit of the prescription route at that moment too,
Totally.
with